Hello and welcome to another Timeless video. Today we're checking out this blue-black tempo deck, which now finally gets to play with Force of Will as the very powerful free counterspell if you're willing to pay a life and exile a blue card from your hand. So this gives us a much better game against all those unfair combo decks that could potentially win the game on turn 1, and just gives us some much needed insurance when trying to tap out for one of our threats. And then we also have Daze, which can also be cast for free if we return an island back to our hand, and then can counter a spell unless its controller pays 1. So this is another very important card that you'll now have to play around if you see that the opponent has a tapped island in play. And then our win conditions that are hopefully going to close out the game include Psychic Frog, which is even banned in Legacy, but we still get to play with it in Timeless, gets to draw a card if it hits our opponent or a Planeswalker, and we can discard cards to put +1 counters on it, so this is a very nice win condition. The Bowmasters can punish opposing card draw and maybe snipe some 1-toughness creatures. There's quite a few in the format, like Ragavan and Ocelot Pride, that are worth taking out. And then a Tamiyo is also kind of a win condition, since it can generate an extra clue token each turn, but it also threatens to transform into a Planeswalker, which if we plus it a few times also threatens to draw half of our deck, which can then also easily set up lethal with a Psychic Frog, as we can just put a bunch of +1 counters on it, and eventually give it flying as well if we exile 3 cards from our graveyard. So an early Tamiyo can also snowball into an early advantage. And then, rounding out the deck, we're also playing with a new Flow State as a powerful card draw spell for just 2 mana. If we have both an instant and sorcery in our graveyard, we now get to look at the top 3 cards and put 2 of those in hand, as opposed to just 1 if we don't meet that condition. So this has also been a very powerful addition to a lot of different formats, including Timeless. And then we've got classics Brainstorm and Ponder to improve our hand. These also play very well with our fetch lands, so we can maybe get rid of some unwanted cards. And of course, Brainstorm is also an instant speed way of potentially transforming Tamiyo into a Planeswalker, as it will draw 3 on the spot, so that can also play around opposing removal. And then to give us a bit more interaction, we've got Fatal Push to deal with opposing creatures, can also enable Revolt with our fetch lanes, and Thoughtseize as some hand disruption, also very good against combo decks or other blue decks that want to keep up counterspells. And then I've also rounded things out with 1 Stern Scolding, especially good against the energy decks that have a lot of powerful creatures with ETB effects that you would rather counter as opposed to remove once they're in play, thinking of Ajani and the Amped Raptor. And then 1 Spell Snare, since at least it's not a dead card like Stern Scolding would be against other combo and control decks, since we can always counter a mana drain with it, for instance, so it's a little bit more useful than a second Stern Scolding would be, and against energy it can still counter a lot of those impactful 2-drops. And then a Treasure Cruise can also be a nice way to refuel, since we have a lot of cards ending up in the graveyard between the fetch lands and all this cheap interaction. Can also fuel Delve with the discards from Psychic Frog, so there's a lot of synergy throughout. And then of course we also get to play with Lurrus, another card that's banned in a lot of formats, but we can occasionally cast it here thanks to our black mana, and then rebuy our win conditions, so that's why we don't have some more expensive permanents to make sure we can run Lurrus instead. And then the mana base has 10 fetch lands. Polluted Delta can also get our basic Swamp and Island, usually the island's the more important one. And then Watery Grave, another card we can get, so we can make both colors. And Undercity Sewers, if we don't need an untapped land, it still lets us surveil one, which can also maybe improve our draw step. And then Strip Mine's also a staple in the format as a land destruction built into a land, so we can occasionally use it to make mana, but we'll often use it to disrupt the opponent's mana base to slow them down, since all our threats and cards in general are so cheap, we only really need 2 lands to operate. We can afford to use Strip Mine as additional interaction to slow down other decks. And yeah, that's pretty much my entire setup here. Another card that you might see in other tempo decks is the Architect, but I decided not to include any alchemy cards in the deck. And of course the Architect is also very synergistic with Daze, since you can potentially pick up the island again, replay it, draw another card. So that's also where all the blue fetch lands are especially important to be able to get an island. But I decided to go without it, and I think the deck is still totally functional if you don't want to run any alchemy cards instead. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw, facing another Lurrus deck. We'll need to find a second land, but I'm willing to give this a shot. If our opponent plays their own Tamiyo, do I force it? Because I don't have the best way to deal with it. It is maybe a Mardu energy deck. Ocelot we can try to Bowmasters. And found the lane for it, so... Now I probably want to leave up Stern Scolding for like an Ajani or an Amped Raptor. They will get a token out of it. But playing Tamiyo would not have helped. And yeah, we'll definitely counter the Raptor. Much better than trying to remove it afterwards. Okay, flow state is good to have. So now we can probably go for the Bowmasters on Ocelots. And I may need to Force of Will another threat. I think I need to get another Watery Grave since I do have Strip Mine, so I don't want to be left without a specific color. Shoot Ocelots and then the Orc can block the cat token. And now a Peddler. Daze would have been the better answer here. Can still force it. Otherwise they might take the force. Yeah, given my hands, we have instant in the graveyard. I can pitch the Brainstorm, although Brainstorm's a way to transform Tamiyo. So maybe get rid of the Ponder and then hope to enable flow state later. Find another Tamiyo. Yeah, I mean, transforming Tamiyo right away has its advantages. And now we find Daze and Force of Will, as well as a Psychic Frog, so all these cards are great. So I can hide Tamiyo and Psychic Frog from a potential Thoughtseize. More interested in the Frog first, I think.
I'd rather avoid a fight. Respect the library.
So probably won't be able to Daze anything significant. Opponent did have the Thoughtseize. Well, if they have a 2-drop they want to resolve, I'll have a counterspell for it no matter what. So possible they just take the card draw spell instead. Takes the Force. And Ragavan is fine. Okay, so Tamiyo probably still keeps plussing here. Play the Frog, and then we have 2 blockers for Ragavan. So we're mostly trying to set up a Tamiyo ultimate now as our win condition. And now Swords is a bit surprising since I know about Daze. So they could have tried to untap first, but maybe they want to use their mana elsewhere. Ajani, that's also a good one to resolve. But yeah, opponent's just too far behind here. We can try and protect Tamiyo, and then a Tamiyo ultimate should seal the deal. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. We have a hand with a ton of disruption, which could be good against a deck without a companion, which is more likely to be combo. I'll give it a shot. And then we can try to use Brainstorm to find a threat. Opponent blue-black. No play. So they might have their own Brainstorm to hide some of their cards from a Thoughtseize. I think I still go for it here. And I could maybe Daze back. Yeah, opponent wants to Brainstorm. Think I'm down to Daze. So they can't hide their best cards. Is their opponent gonna Daze back? Or maybe use a Force of Will? This is how you can very quickly end up with no cards in hand in this format. So right now I'm thinking they're on show and tell combo. Yeah, opponent had their own Daze. So yeah, I think I force back. And then I want to counter the newest Daze, pitching Brainstorm. Well, I guess given the fetch, maybe Brainstorm slightly better than Ponder. Alright, opponent's hand is Grief, double Force of Will, so they could have forced back if they wanted to. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what to make of their deck yet. But yeah, I guess I'll take a Force. If they want to evoke a Grief in the near future, that's fine by me. Strip Mine will have to wait, and then I guess we'll Thoughtseize them again. So next turn I can Ponder with a fetch land. Opponent drew another Grief. They're pretty far from hardcasting those, and I have a Strip Mine, so still favoring the Force here, I think. The only concern with Grief is maybe sniping a Lurrus if I'm about to cast it. So we would love to find a cheap threat. Alright, I like a Tamiyo. And then, I mean, I'm gonna have to shuffle here if I want to cast a Tamiyo. So this can now draw us an extra card each turn, potentially.
I've read nearly the entire library.
Opponent passes it back. Okay, start with an attack, and then could stock up some clue tokens to try and transform Tamiyo in one fell swoop. I guess I could transform Tamiyo now if we go clue token Ponder. So I don't hate that idea either. And try and set up an ultimate. And then Daze can maybe counter a hardcast Grief next turn. And then find to maybe show them the Strip Mine. Tamiyo transforms.
This is not just a battle of arms.
And I'm kind of hoping they tap out for a Grief now. And well, opponent scoops it up. I guess they can beat a transformed Tamiyo. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play. We have Psychic Frog as our threat, some interaction, Force of Will, no companion from our opponent, so could be a combo deck. In which case, Fatal Push may not be at its best. Can get a Survey land turn 1. Opponent with their own sewers. And says no to a mana drain. So probably show and tell combo or some variety thereof. Flow State is nice. Might struggle to get instant in the graveyard, but I guess I can always discard Fatal Push with a Psychic Frog. And at the very least it's a blue card for Force of Will. So let's get this Psychic Frog in play, and then if they don't have an answer, it can maybe run away with the game. They could have their own Force or Daze, which I'm willing to fight over. Frog resolves. Another Sewers. So they're maybe building up towards something big. Possible they have show and tell next turn with Force of Will backup, which could be a problem. Let's get in with the Frog. And the Thoughtseize was huge. So I'll start there. Opponent's gonna Force of Negation back. Okay. Do I now want a Force of Will back or not? They do still have a mana up. I can pay for Daze at least. So this might be an okay spot for Force of Will. Would also, if we counter the Force of Negation, put both instant and sorcery in the graveyard to enable flow state. So that's another small reason to go for it. But feels like they might have another force. Yep. Alright, pitching Stifle. So yeah, definitely looks like Show and Tell with Born Upon a Wind. Alright, well, there's not much I can do here, so that happens. So we now have just instant in the graveyard since the other one gets exiled. I could Strip Mine, which could matter if our opponent needs a third land for Show and Tell. They could have Ancient Tomb, and then it doesn't really matter. So I might want to get the Bowmasters in play first. Could just main phase it 2 here. Just needs to play around Daze, but we know they also have mana drain, so that's a reason to play it now. That resolves. Alright, I could be dead here. But if they can't combo, then we'll get a pretty nice advantage now with a frog hitting them each turn. Treasure Cruise, not a bad draw. So I'll start by attacking. And I'm even willing to ditch the Fatal Push here for an extra damage. Find a fetch land. So, feeling good about Strip Mine on the sewers. Maybe should have done it in combat, so they can float mana and still counterspell me. Because yeah, if we make them float mana in the combat step, then the mana goes away in their second main phase. So I think that would have been optimal. I can still decide to put Lurrus in hand if we want to play around a counterspell. Otherwise I would have been tempted to keep digging for more free interaction. They could also have a Stifle to counter the Strip Mine. They don't, and they didn't float any mana. So that makes me more likely to want to Treasure Cruise here. And leaving a mana up for a potential Thoughtseize we might draw into. Or I can leave an instant in the graveyard for the flow states. Yeah, I'll keep up a mana. And we actually drew a Thoughtseize. So getting pretty lucky here. And the opponent did indeed have Show and Tell with a Crow Mox. So they would have been able to Omniscience into Hullbreaker Horror. Now what do I take? Is an interesting question, because they could still top deck Ancient Tomb and cast a Show and Tell, even without a Crow Mox. I think it's just take the Show and Tell, and then if they draw another one, they still wouldn't be able to cast it. But yeah, this is the type of matchup where all this interaction is so vital. Since we really just need to fight over one key card. So I can discard Fatal Push, enables flow states. Opponent's at 13. So could immediately flow state here. Find another Strip Mine. And I'm not going to be shy about using it. So now they need both another source to cast Show and Tell and the Show and Tell. Can get Tamio going. And then if I hit for 5, I think I want to make it 6 here. So next turn we can present lethal. Alright. Yeah, we pretty much had the ideal draw for this matchup. And yeah, opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. We have a one-lander, and it also enters tapped, so this one's a little rough. We do have Tamiyo plus Brainstorm, double Thoughtseize, but the problem is probably not having enough time to deploy all these cards. There's no free interaction here, so I'll take a mulligan. This is a little bit better. We are missing a threat, but I have some fetch lands to enable Treasure Cruise and then some cheap interaction, so hopefully that'll suffice. Opponent blue-red with a channeler on 1, so we can always try to push it. Opponent ponders, that's fine. May want to play around an opposing Daze and wait to push until we can pay for it. And then I can start by getting a Surveil land. Yeah, that seems fine. Hope we don't get stifled. Alright, and then get a sewers. And Brainstorm is pretty decent here with a fetch land. Although both Stern Scolding and Fatal Push will have targets in this matchup. So maybe I'm happier just binning the extra card for Treasure Cruise, since we already have a Ponder. And we're still looking for a threat. Tamiyo's a good one, would have been excellent with the Brainstorm, obviously. Channeler is turning into a pretty big threat. They're getting closer to Delirium. So I could also take a turn off just pushing it, while they can't daze me, I guess. Sure, let's try that. Opponent's gonna force. Trigger Channeler. They can pay for my Daze. And they got rid of their own. In that case, I think I just pass, again planning to get a tapped land end of turn, or we can keep the fetch land for Ponder. Opponent is getting pretty aggressive here, so I could also Daze the Bolt, but I'll let it slide. Bolt could have taken care of Tamiyo. And now Treasure Cruise is a good one, although it also means that the Channeler is no longer a big threat, and their opponent tapped out, so we can Daze this. So unless they have a Force of Will left, I'm pretty happy. Question is whether I wanted to pick up a different land. Could have gotten a Watery Grave, floated a mana, and then picked it up. Opponent actually had a Force of Will as their last card. Alright, that makes more sense. So they will get to draw 3 now. We've got our own Treasure Cruise we're building towards. And yeah, Strip Mine makes things tricky, since now I'm not going to want to fetch end of turn. My own Strip Mine's funny. So if I play Sewers, it's getting Strip Mined. And then I can just play my Tamiyo out, I guess. Flow States would be effective. We're missing sorcery, but I do have a Ponder. Think I keep it. So then I'm less incentivized to fetch now. Keep up Stern Scolding in case we need it. Opponent still hits the sewers as we suspected. So yeah, there's a lot going on this game. Alright, Ragavan, we're gonna try to scold. And Daze would be effective. Opponent Brainstorms. And now Channeler is active. And they found the Daze as well. Yeah, opponent's not missing. they've got one card left. Can strip mine the untapped Steam Vents, play a Tamiyo. Opponent bolts face. Could have been an answer to Tamiyo, so now we have a blocker for Ragavan, but Channeler hits for 3, so pretty much need to top deck a Fatal Push. Architect can draw cards later. Thoughtseize is not very effective. So, yeah, if I fetch down to 1, Architect is also lethal, so that doesn't work. Bowmasters I wouldn't be able to cast until next turn, and that's not really a solution. So what am I hoping for? I mean, I guess if Tamiyo attacks and I Treasure Cruise, it will transform, so I can shrink their team down. But that only helps with Architect, really. I guess it's still the play. But I can't think of much that I can draw. Yeah, I can first fetch my basic island. Treasure Cruise, have a mana left. Transform Tamiyo, and then push Channeler. But then I still die to the Ragavan hitting me for 1. So that doesn't do it. I guess I could draw the basic Swamp for Fatal Push, I guess technically would do it. And then we'll leave an instant in here for Flow State. Found a Strip Mine and another Tamiyo. So I can plus Tamiyo, get an island, play a Tamiyo. And then we still die. Alright. Yeah, some well-timed Dazes and Force of Wills to get them across the finish line. Tamiyo can now block the Channeler, but Ragavan's still enough. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a functional hand. Starting with probably Scalding Tarn and then planning to get a Surveil land. Unless we need to Fatal Push. Opponent also blue-black and a mill deck. Okay, don't see those very often. So that's fine. I think I'm leaning untap first to play around Daze before we push the crab. Do have to watch out for their mill card. After we search our library, they can cast it for free. But now I can Fatal Push, maybe keeping up Strip Mine so I can still Strip Mine their land. Now I don't have a threat in play, so Strip Mining them also slows me down. And now that Daze is no longer a factor, I don't mind hitting the Watery Grave. Cephalid Colosseum. And a Brainstorm, that's fine. So we have instant in the graveyard. This turn we maybe Brainstorm plus Shuffle. Play the land first, although I guess this is not an island, so we don't have to worry about Daze. Speaking of, there's a Daze and a Ponder. Ponder would add sorcery for Flow State. Do I keep Force of Will is the question. I would prefer a Thoughtseize in this matchup. There's no one card that beats me, but our opponent's going to play a bunch of big mill effects, and over time those can add up. And I can't keep 2-for-1ing myself. But yeah, for now, maybe ditch Brainstorm. And yeah, maybe it is the Force of Will. I want Fatal Push for another crab. And I want a Ponder, which I can cast now. Fine to shock myself, or life total's not in immediate danger. then find Tamio. Could also draw the Force first and then next turn Tamio. In case they have their own discard spell, and then we'll have Force as an option. Opponent's got their own Tamio. We have the Fatal Push. Although Daze also would have been a fine answer, I suppose. So play Tamio. Opponent may be considering their own Force of Will.
Oh, how am I supposed to focus
I'll push now.
on one project?
And pass it back. And then I don't think I want to draw the swamp, so we can shuffle it away, but yeah, opponent's given up. I guess not drawing a second land just put them way too far behind. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with what looks like a functional hand, although we are missing some counter spells. Opponent without Companion makes it more likely that they're a combo deck where we want more cheap counter spells. I think I still try it and hope we don't get comboed on turn 1. And Watery Grave into Thoughtseize. At least our hand's pretty good against discard. Got a bunch of cantrips, a few threats. Opponent takes a Tamio. So now we can keep up and Brainstorm. Could also Ponder, to be fair. But if they have a Strip Mine, I want to leave the fetch available so we can play a turn 2 Frog. Okay, now I can get a Surveil land. And not in a hurry to Brainstorm. And a Force of Will seems fine. Our opponent does have double blue up, so mana drain's also a concern. So playing the Frog into open mana is maybe not the best. Could just pass and then Brainstorm shuffle. And wait to find a Thoughtseize before we deploy the Frog. Opponent's on Reanimator. Okay, I don't think we fight over the Entomb, we fight over the Reanimate. Opponent going for the Sire of Insanity. And Mystical Tutor can maybe get a reanimation spell. Or maybe a free counter. Yeah, gets the Reanimate. So if Sire resolves, we would have to discard our hands, so that's not what we want. Opponent's got a Psychic Frog of their own, but I can't fight over that one, we can push that one instead. So yeah, as things finally work themselves out, push answers Frog, Force of Will answers Reanimates, and then we're pretty far ahead. Yep, so definitely need to force. And then, let's see, do I want to Brainstorm first? I could. Find another Force, which I'll happily keep. So then, I think I'm shuffling away a land and maybe a Brainstorm over Ponder. Or I can go Ponder and Brainstorm. The main concern, I guess, is having enough blue cards to enable the Force of Wills, because I'm going to have to pitch one now. So yeah, I guess this is okay. And then we're gonna fetch Watery Grave, push the Psychic Frog, and then Force of Will pitching Ponder. Then play my own Frog, still have a second Force of Will as backup, in case they top deck. And then hopefully we can ride this Frog to victory. And then a Treasure Cruise is not a bad follow-up with 6 cards in graveyard. That's the drawback of all those tutor effects. You are 2-for-1ing yourself, but our opponent actually top-decked another Reanimate right away. So we got lucky to find the second Force. And now I can Treasure Cruise right away, or first see what we draw. Bowmasters could be effective. So I can Treasure Cruise emptying my entire graveyard, or I can leave an instant or maybe a creature for Lurrus instant would be for flow state. I kind of like the idea of being able to play Bowmasters here to keep up the pressure. So I'll empty my entire graveyard. And then I won't be able to cast a force. Opponent just drew a fetch land. With blue fetch lands, you always have to watch out that they can't get the land that returns an instant or sorcery on top of their deck. But they don't have enough islands for it. Take my turn. Flow state means we have a blue card for Force of Will. So in that case, I can even consider discarding a land and playing another Bowmasters just to increase our clock. Alright, and then I don't have to play the Scalding Tarn, can keep it for Psychic Frog. So I don't think there's a one-top deck that saves the opponents. And they are facing 6 damage. Force of Negation hits the graveyard. And their own Psychic Frog, I'm willing to Force of Will, but I don't think it saves them here. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a lot of disruption. Double Thoughtseize, Force of Will. Opponent's not running a companion, so more likely to be combo. I'll try it. Of course, we do still need a threat. And if our opponent starts with a turn 1 creature, we could be in trouble. And Breeding Pool untapped, so now I'm thinking Show and Tell and a potential Veil of Summer. So Thoughtseize may not land, but I think we gotta try it with 3 in hand. Can Force of Will back, or opponent could do the same. Alright, opponent's gonna just Brainstorm. I'll let that slide since we have 2 more Thoughtseizes. Otherwise I would be more tempted to fight over it. And it's definitely not as bad as a Veil of Summer would have been. So they get to hide their most important cards. And does Thoughtseize resolve? It does. And it is indeed Show and Tell, double Daze. Omniscience, Flow State. They have the Ancient Tomb, so next turn, for all we know, they could go Show and Tell, put in Omniscience. So that's a reason to take the Omniscience. And then leave them with double Daze. Flow State is still missing sorcery. Yeah, I think I gotta take the Omniscience, because otherwise I can't beat Show and Tell. Zone Guard's not bad either. Can accumulate lands. Force of Will's not gonna work because of Daze. I guess they currently don't have a land to get back. And Fatal Push was the perfect answer. So, yeah, I think it makes sense to just push now. And our opponent can't double Daze because they only have 1 island to return. Our opponent's still gonna go for it. So that worked out. And next turn we can try again with Thoughtseize. And Flow States without getting 2 cards out of it is fine by me. So we still need to find a threat, but otherwise we're doing pretty well. So let's see what we're working with. And yeah, there's the Show and Tell they were hiding. Right now the Zone Guard scares me more. I guess we can just take both. So our opponent's on empty. Tamio. That is a good card. Yeah, I don't think I want to force that, or do I? Maybe I should. I guess this is where Stern Scolding would have been slightly better than a Spell Snare, although opponent could have dazed back. I think I do force. And then, is Spell Snare even worth it? I'll keep the Brainstorm, means that if I draw my own Tameo, I can transform her right away. And then now with both Brainstorm and Ponder, we have a bit more selection. So I think that means we first Brainstorm and then Ponder, so I can shuffle away cards I don't like. Although Ponder first, if I find Tameo, would have worked out a little bit better. Well, we found a bunch of lanes, so... can just shuffle first and then Ponder now. And get a swamp, since my life total could matter. They've got the Zone Guard. Opponent surveils. And then, if I draw Psychic Frog, I won't be able to cast it yet. Flow States is great. Won't be able to cast it right now, but we'll have it for next turn. Question is if I should play around an opposing Thoughtseize. I don't think so. Alright, so I guess in hindsight getting a Surveil land might have worked out better, but if we drew a 1-drop like Tameo, I could have cast her and paid for Daze. Is this another Zone Guard? That would be bad. It is a Flow State, and that is enabled now. Yeah, that's pretty good. We've got our own Flow State into Flow State. I'm jealous. And a Strip Mine, not super effective anymore. Alright, well, let's Flow States ourselves. Find Psychic Frog and Flow States. So we can now Force of Will pay for Daze if they were to combo. Another Tameo. I think I gotta let that slide now. And then hope that our Psychic Frog can overpower her.
Warm tea and a fascinating story.
And find our own Tameo. So I probably want to start with a Flow State to try and find another land and then play my own Tameo. A land Force of Will. And then I don't need to fetch right now if they don't make me. Okay, so the game goes on.
Text down on the surface.
Opponent gets a clue. Maybe should have blocked to play around ninjutsu shenanigans. Alright, and then I think I do get my Surveil lands now. Another Tameo is a blue card, so that might be good enough. Tameo attacks. And play Frog. Opponent can hardcast Force of Will too now, although it's going to cost him some life. And yeah, there it is. Nope, opponent's still pitching their own Tameo. If I force back, it leaves me shields down, but it's not like our opponent can show and tell to combo kill me here. They still have a clue they can sack next turn to transform their Tameo. So they will have a transformed Tameo, which can then start plussing. Yeah, I kind of need the Psychic Frog as a threat to pressure it. So our opponent's still hanging on to the Daze. But we should see a Tameo transformation now. Unless, I guess never mind. Well, no, unless I can give the Psychic Frog flying and give it 3 power after sacking the clue, but then our opponent would just sack the 2 clues in response to make sure Tamiyo doesn't die. But that is an interesting play we could make here. That kind of forces them to transform Tamiyo now. Maybe it is worth it. So what's the upside for me? I'll have a 3-powered frog, which we maybe want anyways. I can still transform Tamiyo next turn with another clue and the frog hitting them. And it forces my opponent to tap out. Yeah, let's go for it, so get rid of some lands. Go to blockers. Draw a card. Ooh, Bowmasters. That's an interesting draw. I could keep the Bowmasters. And a Force of Will. If Tamiyo transforms here, she will shrink down my team, so then I still need to discard a card to the Psychic Frog to actually draw with it. I think we forced the issue. But yeah, this is a big decision point. At least the Bowmasters could be returned with Lurrus at some point. So we're forcing Tamiyo to transform. They also have to take 2 of Ancient Tomb. So is there a world where I can attack for lethal? Probably not.
Think before you act.
Fatal Push would have been useful earlier. Alright, Psychic Frog I believe also draws if we hit a Planeswalker, which is useful. So we could finish off their Tamiyo if we really want. And I think I do go for it. So I need to first draw. And then discard. And then by drawing with a frog, we still transform our Tamiyo. Alright, big moment. Can they answer the frog somehow? They cannot. So frog draws, Tamiyo transforms. Opponent surveils. Yeah, win or lose, this has been a very interesting game with a lot of close decisions. Says no to the zone guard, since the frog can just fly over for the win next turn. And drew a land, Tamiyo can only plus. Could put a Lurrus in hand here, although that's going to cost me 3 life down to 2. I might prefer having the extra card in hand for frog, but I guess we'll end up with a card anyway. So maybe that's worth it. I don't think there's anything that burns me. They might have their own Bowmasters, I suppose. And I should have a Watery Grave left. Alright, fine. The only drawback is that I won't be able to Thoughtseize now. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. So Tamiyo and Psychic Frog go the distance. And we're back up to Platinum. So yeah, this blue-black tempo deck has a lot of cool play patterns. And yeah, it's definitely one of the most interactive decks in the format, giving you all these free counterspells nowadays. And you still have some powerful threats to help close out the game. So yeah, if you're a fan of these powerful formats with a lot of cheap interaction and a lot of back and forth, this might be up your alley. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.